So I don't know how many readers we have in the house. I don't get a lot of time to read just novels or things like that, but usually in the summer when I have a break, I have, you read those books that you don't really admit that you read, like the guilty pleasure books, but I have this one author named Louis L'Amour. Has anyone ever read Louis L'Amour? Wayne and I. All right. Yeah. So this guy, Louis L'Amour, I don't know how I found him a long time ago. He writes primarily Westerns. I don't know what that says about me. Anyways, he's like my guilty pleasure. Some of you may read like suspense or crime or horror or, dare I say, like romance books. I don't know. I don't know what your books of choice are, but Louis L'Amour is one of my favorites. And he has these two books that aren't Westerns, though. Wayne, I'm not sure if you've read these. One's called The Walking Drum, and one's called The Last of the Breed. And they're both like these really exciting adventure books where the main characters, the odds are stacked against them, and they just kind of go for it. They throw everything to the wind. It's about survival in some of them. It's about this spirit of kind of tackling and survival and making things right again. And they're awesome stories. I've read both of those books so many, many times. Another book kind of in that same theme by a different author. Has anyone read, they made that movie Into the Wild, the Chris McCandless story. Do you guys know that? About the guy who, when he graduated from college in the US, I think he cut up all his ID cards, burned his cash, hitchhiked, made his way up to Alaska, and eventually died of starvation out in the middle of nowhere. They made a movie about it. But when I was reading that book, it became a bestseller when I was reading that book, it stirred the same kind of feelings in me of adventure and pioneering spirit and something about it, something about the way, not only the way the author writes, but just that compelling feeling of there's something more that it's worth giving my life to. I just love those kinds of stories. And in our story as a church, we have one of our culture statements, it revolves around this idea. It's about being pioneers. It's a culture of adventure and innovation. And this is how we say it. It says we openly consider and pursue creative new ideas that contribute to our shared sense of mission. So over the last number of weeks, since we got going after Labor Day, we have been spending time working through our culture statements as a church. If you don't know, we have 6 statements that aren't about theology, but they're about a way and a rhythm of life. And so today we're talking about this one, about what it means to be pioneers. It may seem a little strange to you, but if you think about the story that we read as Jesus comes into the scene and introduces a new way of being and ushers in this, what we call the kingdom, there's a sense of adventure and innovation that happens. Things that had been so rooted historically for the Jewish people are turned on their head. Everything is switched around, and there's this like new compelling thing that happens and people buy into and are willing to give their life for. As you read through the book of Acts, the story of the new church, the New Testament church, you see these radical examples of people willing to give and sell everything and partner together and live in ways that just seem, in some ways, even now for our culture, it just feels so foreign and weird. But there's this adventurous spirit. And so when we were starting as a church 4 years ago, and we were trying to figure out what is God doing in us, and we recognized we want to capture this sense of adventure. Because even as we're kind of a young church, and it can feel like this is very much an adventure as we kind of stumble around and are trying to figure it out as we go, I think very quickly we can get into ruts where we just go through routine. And I don't think following Jesus is supposed to be that way. I think there's always supposed to be this sense of adventure and creativity and open hands and innovation. And we always want to pay attention to that collectively as a whole church, but also individually. What does it mean then to live your life, if you've chosen to follow Jesus, with that sense of spirit and adventure and kind of a reckless abandon? Not to cause hurt to yourself or others around you, but a way of saying, I'm all into what this is about. And so that's what this culture statement is about, being pioneers for Jesus, this culture of adventure and innovation. So we have often had guests come and join us different weeks as we've been working through our different statements. People that we have relationship with, friendship with, people who help kind of exemplify and embody that, some of those characteristics, those ideas. And so really, really excited to have my friend Eva here today. So can we give like a rousing Sunday morning reunion welcome to Eva as she comes up? So welcome, Eva. And invited Eva to come for a number of reasons. Eva's one of the smartest people I know. So you have a Harvard business degree, right?
That's not correct, actually.
Oh.
I do have a degree from Harvard, but not in business.
Oh, so a degree from Harvard, though.
Right.
So I guess it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal.
But the first time I met Eva, we were working at the meeting house together. or I had already been working at the meeting house, and Eva got hired to join the team at the meeting house. And I remember hearing that she was a graduate from Harvard. So immediately I was feeling like, I got to bring my A game. Like, I got to step it up. She's going to be brilliant. And I failed miserably, but I tried to add humor as a way of making it work. But Eva's been a friend, and she's no longer working with the meeting house, doing different things. And that's why I wanted to invite her, because I think, Eva, you exemplify someone who has a deep love for Jesus, and also ability to say what's around me, where are the opportunities for me to get involved with what God's doing, and to try some new things. And you brought that to our team when we served together, and so I'm really excited you're here. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I am hopefully not disappointing in that I haven't gone and cut up my ID cards and burned all my cash and risked starvation in Alaska, but you can still be a pioneer or innovator without doing some of those things, so hopefully.
Yeah. Eva, can you, every time we have a guest here, we love to ask and just learn when and why and how did you decide to follow Jesus, just as a starting point? When did you say yes to Jesus, and how did that kind of happen? Who are the people involved in that, and can you just tell us a little bit of that?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Oh, and you can hear me now. So I didn't grow up in a Christian family. My parents aren't Christians, and at the same time, I feel really fortunate because I feel like I had really great Christian influences throughout my life. So my babysitter when I was 3 started taking me to church. When I was 5, I became a Christian through a backyard vacation Bible school that happened at a neighbor's house, and moved to Whitby when I was 7, and there was a family of a little girl who ended up being one of my best friends in my class, who took my sister and me to church every Sunday. So again, sort of three different towns, 3 different families, but enabled me to sort of like grow up going to church, even though I didn't grow up in a Christian family. And there was a Sunday school teacher when I was in grade 8 who was very impactful, and I think that's sort of where I made my faith my own. And so I was baptized when I was 17, and and have been following Jesus ever since. And
how did you decide to join the meeting house team? I don't know if I've ever asked you that. What made you say, hey, I'm going to go work for the church?
Yeah, so I don't think I ever thought I would work for a church. I think growing up, especially as someone who didn't come from a Christian family, I do think I felt like an outsider coming to church because, I wasn't there with my parents, and there are a bunch of things where when you sort of are part of a church as a kid, I think like so much of it has to do with your parents bringing you there. So I always felt like a little bit outside, and for me, coming to the meeting house was really the first time I felt like I had a church home that felt like my spiritual family. So I think the meeting house was like super impactful for me. And I think a few of you here know a guy named Paul Morris, and he was the lead pastor at the downtown site when Andrew, my husband, and I were going. And he's very convincing. I know you've experienced this as well. And so
some may say slimy, but
yeah, that's true. Convincing is probably a nice way of putting it. Yeah. And so I was just sort of exploring what I wanted to do next in my career, and one of the things I thought about doing was starting my own sort of consulting business so that I could give back more to the church and have a bit more free time. I don't think I really knew what it meant to start my own consulting business. I don't know that it would actually have been a part-time job. But then an opportunity came up to do a 6-month contract at the meeting house, and that's how it started. And I ended up staying for 5 years.
6 months to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's the classic Paul Morris
That's
move,
the classic
too.
Paul. Yeah, that's true.
Just help out for a little bit.
Yeah, just help him for a little bit. If I didn't like it, like he's not going to make me stay. It would be totally fine. And it was great. I really enjoyed my time there.
Great. And I should have mentioned, welcome Andrew. Andrew and I have also been friends for lots of time. All of us have been friends, obviously, so welcome Andrew too. So I want to show a quick video clip here. So Eva is a co-founder of a company called Borrowell, and the chief operating officer for the company that got started a number of years ago. So we'll hear about that in a second. I remember I knew you had started the company, and I'd heard about it. I'd been hearing stories, mostly as I hang out and talk with Andrew. But then I remember I was listening to the Blue Jays broadcast, and then Jerry Halworth, in between innings, said something, and I was like, wait a second, what? And he mentioned Borrowell, and I was like, what the heck? That's Eva's company. So I know it's a growing company and things are happening. But then I found this, was it a TV spot, this commercial?
Yeah,
or?
yeah. We have a television commercial that's running.
Okay, so I just want to show it because I think it's hilarious and it gives you a little really quick glimpse into Borrowell. I thought it was hilarious. I'm trying to gauge the murmur of laughter of like, yeah, that's funny, or disapproval. I'm not sure. Can you tell us a little bit about the company, why you decided to start that? I know you were at the Meeting House for 5 years, but then what led to that sense of kind of a pioneering spirit of starting a company, and how did it go? What were you feeling? I imagine in the beginning it was like, can this possibly work? Sometimes we see success stories that feels like, oh, it was great from the beginning, but can you just tell us a bit of that story?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. So Borrowell's mission is that we help Canadians make great decisions about credit. We were the first company to give credit scores out for free, and we offer tips and product recommendations. We have our own personal loan to help people pay off credit card debt. So we're in the financial technology space. And yeah, how it got started, I was on parental leave with my daughter, May, who you may have seen here. She's now 5, so she was 1 at the time. And a friend of mine, Andrew Graham, he had quit his job and had decided he was going to start a company in the financial technology space, fintech. And we had known each other for a number of years and had sort of started a social venture together. So we'd sort of worked together, not officially, but sort of on a little side project. And I was exploring other opportunities as well, sort of, I think, as many people do when you have a bit of time off, and was sort of thinking about the next thing that I wanted to do. And it was really just a more of like a flippant conversation around, well, if I don't find something, I'll just come and join your startup. And he was like, well, what would you do? And I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you need done? And he's like, what do you want to do? And so it started out that way. And I started and said, well, I just help you out for a couple weeks, and we'll sort of see where it goes from there. And 4.5 years later, we're here. So it wasn't my idea. I joined the co-founding team, but I'd always had an interest in personal finance. I wanted to do something that was impactful and meaningful, and I thought this was a big problem that needed to be solved. So the fact that Canadians know very little about personal finance, we have quite a large consumer debt problem, and there didn't seem to be great solutions out there.
So in that, can you tell us a little bit, what's been the most rewarding thing about being a part of this startup? And maybe what's been one of the challenges, biggest struggles maybe? Yeah,
so I'll share 2 things that I think have been really rewarding. It wasn't that long ago that it was literally a PowerPoint presentation where we were at the Ryerson DMZ. We were with a bunch of Ryerson students and us, and it was putting together ideas on a whiteboard. And it's pretty exciting now. We have over 700,000 people who use Borrowell, who've gotten their credit score for free. So that's pretty exciting. I think that makes us, at least by user count, one of the largest fintech companies in Canada. So yeah, it's like really gratifying to get those user comments and member sort of stories back around how we're helping people. They didn't know what went into a credit score. They didn't know that they'd done things inadvertently that had damaged it, and by following our tips and advice and taking our product recommendations, they've been able to improve their credit score. And now they just like feel much more at peace. They don't feel stressed financially, and they feel like they might be able to achieve some of their life goals, like purchasing a home at some point. So that's really gratifying, and really impactful. And I'd say the second thing that has been really rewarding is just seeing the team that we've built and the culture that we've built at our company. What we stand for, and the fact that there are now 50 people who work at Borrowell, and many of them would say this is the best job that they've had. They've learned so much. They love coming to work. They love that what they're doing matters and that they're contributing to something good. So I think that's also really gratifying.
It's amazing. So, struggles.
Yeah, so there's definitely been lots of struggles. There's been, it has not been smooth sailing along the way. There have been times where we worried we would run out of money. There have been times where we worried that we wouldn't be able to get any customers, which is pretty important when you're running a business. And actually, the idea of a free credit score came out of a way of like, how can we get the word out about what it is that we're doing? Because we started out doing something slightly different. We started out doing just personal loans, which we still do today. But it was really hard to get the word out there around the fact that this is what we were doing. So the analogy that I give is that online lending in 2014 is sort of like online dating probably was in like 1999. Of like, no one really did it, and so anyone that was online dating, it was like really, really sketchy, and the only reason why you would do like dating online is if you couldn't find someone in real life. And I think what people felt like for lending and maybe 5 years ago was that like, why would you do it online? Why don't you just like go into a branch and do it in the bank? The only reason you do it online is like a bank wouldn't actually lend to you. And we were trying to reverse that. So like launching credit scores for free was a way for us to get the word about who we were and why we were doing what we were doing. So I think like through struggle, there comes ideas of like inspiration and problem solving as well. But there's been a lot of struggles, and I think that the biggest thing is as a founder, when it's like so tied up in sort of like who we are, I think the failure can feel very personal, and that it's not just the company failing. I think like I felt like a failure because like we weren't able to solve certain problems. I think and the team feels that way too. So then you feel like the burn. Not only do I feel this way, but like the rest of the team feels this way. And then like how do you sort of like pull yourself up out of that and still have the energy to sort of keep on going? How do you keep like motivating people when you're sort of like down in those doldrums?
So then, as a follower of Jesus, being a part of this founding team, let me back up. I kind of have like the weird reality where my job and faith and everything just kind of is all one mashup, which makes me like the abnormal person. Most people live and work and do all kinds of things outside of the church, and they're part of the church community, and it's wonderful. We're all in this together, but I have the privilege of kind of, this is what I do. But everyone here relates probably way more to you than to me in my experience. Can you just maybe share with us a little bit about what it's been like for you and what you're learning about following Jesus in your vocation, and what's been the opportunities that have been so amazing, and what have been some of those tough things, even just in business, like we have a bunch of people in all different kinds of roles here, teachers and bankers and all kinds of different, everything in between. And they probably relate way more to your experience of being a follower of Jesus in their place of work and some of the struggles that come with it. Can you just talk a little bit about what it means to bring Jesus into those environments and what you're learning and what you're discovering?
Yeah, no, I think it is hard because I think in the environment that we live in today, we want to be like really respectful of other people, and I think we often feel like, I don't want to talk about religion at work. I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. But at the same time, I think like we all want to be like our authentic selves at work, and we want to bring in who we are, and that's something that we encourage at World. We want people to like feel like they can be who they are, and not feel like they have to hide a certain sort of side of them in order to fit in into a specific culture. So yeah, I think there's like definite challenges, and there's probably challenges as a leader too, because what I say may carry a bit more weight, or people may be watching a bit more. So again, I want to make sure that people don't feel like I'm using my position to like unduly influence something. But at the same time, I do want to model for people that like they should be who they want to be, and that they can be their authentic selves. So there's definitely like a bunch of tension there. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of it is around like asking God like what your purpose is and where He's placed you, and that could be because you're there for like a specific person. Maybe you're there to like give encouragement to someone, and I think bringing that in and like being more conscious of that can be helpful. It's not something I do well. I think the prayer that we went through at the very beginning, I think was great. Like I'm very much like a doer, and my days are packed, and it's all around like go do. So I think being able to take that step back and reflect and take a step back and like looking around to seeing what's going on is super helpful, and even that having that moment of reflection to say like, why am I here? Like, what do you want me to do, and how can I be responsive and not just sort of bluntly checking off a to-do list?
Yeah. So in that's really good. That's really interesting. So when you decided to do it with your friend, when he was telling you about a startup, you just thought, well, maybe I can help you for a little bit, and then it's become 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, because sometimes when we do like my kind of role, people will use a term like, I feel like God called me or led me into being a pastor or something. I didn't have that experience myself. I've shared that often. I just feel like it's my next, I'm just trying to be faithful with what God has said and invited me into in this moment, right? Did you feel like God invited you into this opportunity? Like, how do you discern when you said, is this God's will? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah.
Or is it just kind of like you just kind of stumble into stuff?
I feel very much more like I like stumble into things, that everything, like even from working at the meeting house to what I'm doing now, like they were never things that I thought I would do. It does feel like, there's an opportunity that comes up, and I sort of say, I've got a few criteria that I look at. Is this something that I feel excited about in terms of what like the mission and purpose is? Is this something that I I feel like I can like learn and develop my own skills and, you know, what God has given me. Do I think that this is a good place to use those talents? And then it's the people as well as, am I excited about like doing this with the group of people that's there?
So would you say like this opportunity, this leadership role you have allows you to exercise what you would say gifts God has given you?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think it probably in more ways than like any other role that I've had before. So I feel super fortunate about that for sure.
Would you have any thoughts or advice for people who would say, I'm in a role right now where I don't feel like I can exercise some of those gifts, right? Because we love to link. I had a conversation with someone this week. We were chatting about work, and they said to me, I think they're just kind of struggling a little bit. And I have this conversation often where we love to link a sense of our work, our vocation with our passions. And it's kind of a luxury and a privilege to put those together, right? It's almost like it's a real privilege to say the things I love doing, I get paid for. Where a lot of people in the rest of the world say, well, I work to support my family and survive, and then I use my gifts or whatever in a whole bunch of other ways. They don't necessarily try to always feel like they have to be together. So any thoughts on that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends, which I know is like not the most gratifying answer. But I think I've had like just different situations where maybe my job didn't fulfill like everything they wanted, but I had things sort of outside my life that did. And I think in some ways a job is like a relationship, right? Like a relationship with your husband or wife, where I know that if I want to go see a musical, like my husband is not the best person to take. You know, there's a reason why we have friendships and relationships like outside of, you know, a relationship that you have with a spouse, if that's one that you have to start with. So I think sometimes people maybe put too much stock in like one job or like one relationship, wanting that to fulfill everything that you have. And even though like I would say I love my job now and I find it super fulfilling, there are still things that I like to do that are not part of my job. And so I think it really depends. It's like, you know, maybe what percentage of your job should be like super fulfilling and then something that you like to do. And depends what your passions are too. I think like some passions, it's like hard to link to paid employment sometimes. So
this is totally off script, which I'm sure you expected with me.
It's great.
So we've been having conversation as a church. So, you know, when we first started this church in our living room like 4 years ago, it was the idea, like, could we start a church? And so some of your identity, or a lot of your identity, comes from this common idea of, can we do this together? And then at some point you look around and you say, like, we've kind of done that, right? So continue to find your identity by being like, we're starting a church, like that wears out. And if you hang on to it, I feel like it's unhealthy. So we as a church are in this conversation now. Okay, we're a church, we've established, we don't have it all figured out, clearly. We have lots of things to work through. But now what does God want us to be? In a business, from a business side of things, for you guys, can we start this company? I'm just wondering if there's any relatable things as we're trying to figure out, so now what's next? 4.5 years in for you guys, are you having those kinds of conversations?
Yeah, no, I think those are like the conversations that keep us up. So this may be a good parallel, but like in the startup world, you sort of think of yourself as a startup for a certain stage, and then you become a scale up. And I think startup, you're sort of figuring out exactly whether you have, we call it like product market fit, right? Does what we offer, are there people out there who are like looking for it? And if not, then you sort of like adapt and you change, and just to see again, like, you know, what we put out first may not be perfect, and so let's continue to tweak, or maybe the audience isn't exactly what we were looking for. So there's a lot of testing and experimentation, which maybe is what you went through as well in terms of that sort of like startup stage. But then you sort of find that niche of customers or members, or, you know, that community of people who like what you have, and then it's about scaling. And I think for us, scaling is like, how do we keep the things that we like about who we are and those like values and that, but then how does that actually scale to become something bigger? Again, if scale is something that you're looking for, but I think for us, scale was definitely a goal. And what we want to do is like, how can we do more of it, and how can we continue to be effective without like losing some of the things that we like about who we are and sort of how we've gotten here.
Yeah, it's really good, because in a local church sense, you like obviously you want to grow and welcome more people around and see people find Jesus for the first time. But at some point, you're like, is the point in a church sense just to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, or to start new things? So there's a lot of overlap. It's interesting.
Yeah, I think there is, because I think that even for us, it's like, is there another act? Like, are we just going to keep doing what we're doing now, or to like grow? Do we need to like start and launch like a new little like mini project, right? That may not bear a ton of fruit in the next year, but like are the seeds for something in 18 to 24 months.
Yeah. We're going to give you a chance to ask any questions from Eva if you want. I just want to ask maybe one more here. Can you tell us something that Jesus is teaching and forming and shaping you? I know you and Andrew and your kids are part of the East Toronto, sorry, I'm battling this cold, East Toronto Meeting House down in the beaches. So you went from being on being in the church to working at the church to now being a part of the church again. What are you guys, even as a family, learning? How's this journey shaping you? Andrew does still work for the Meeting House. What are you guys learning, discovering? What is God awakening in you? What is that journey looking like for you now, Eva?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it hasn't changed a ton. Again, I think I know my natural personality and tendency is like to do as much as I can on my own, and like the biggest struggle for me is like remembering dependence on God and bringing that back into sort of into the rhythm of life. I've started fasting a day a week, and I found that to be really helpful. Definitely to sort of like remind myself of dependence and when I'm hungry, I'm definitely aware of it. So it's like I need to be as aware of that dependence on God as on food. And I think just it's helped me be a bit more mindful as well throughout the week. So that's something for sure. And then I think as the kids are getting older, they're 5 and 8 now, it's been super exciting to sort of see them and how they're processing things and the people that they're becoming. So I think we're sort of feeling that, they notice what we do. And so I think, how we live our lives and what the priorities are, the conversations, they're constant witnesses to how we live our lives. So I think that that also it's good. I think it helps us again be more mindful about like who we are and what we're doing.
It's good. Any thoughts, questions, ideas, things you want to shout out? Don't be shy.
Do you plan to come back work for church sometime later?
So Serge asked whether I plan to come back and work at a church sometime. You know what? I really hold things pretty open. Usually I have like no idea what I would do next. I'm super happy at Borrowell, and I think there's like a long journey ahead, but I'm very open to the next thing, and I've learned never to say never.
Eva, as a woman in leadership, how has that been?
Yeah, I think the women in leadership is a great question, and I would say that where I am today in financial services, technology, and startup, it's like a trifecta of of like not a lot of diversity. That's been a big part of Borrowell's culture and identity and our values is valuing diversity. In some ways, there's been a huge advantage, I'd say, of being a woman of color as a founder of a fintech startup. Because there aren't that many people that look like me, and this is sort of embarrassing, but I'll meet people and they'll sort of know who I am, and I won't necessarily know who they are, because it's like, you're another like white dude with a beard that is like, you sort of, they don't all look the same to me, but there's a lot of them, so I think I've definitely benefited by like having more profile, because there's it's not culturally appropriate to have like an all straight white male panel anymore. So I get invited to be part of those, and I think that's been helpful, and it's been great for the company. I think it's been great to showcase. And one of the things that I do want to say is, like, I don't have a background in technology or startups or tech. I don't have a background in anything. I worked at a church before I did this, so but I'm here and I'm doing it. So I really want that to be encouragement to people of you can do this. And I think one time I said, like, I don't know why people think a college dropout is like totally could start his own company, but a woman with 15 years of work experience couldn't. But people find it like strange where, after maternity leave, I would go and join a startup. So the same way that you think a 20-year-old college dropout could start a company, I think we should think a 35-year-old woman could also start a company. So I think it's been great. And I think because of that, I've had lots of women sort of say, I'm thinking about starting a company. Do you think I could do this? I was like, I totally think you can. So I I do think that it's a super exciting thing to start your own company and to build something. And there's definitely more people doing that in Toronto now, and there's a real community of it and support for it. So it would be, I think it's really important for all of us that there's more diversity in who's doing that it shouldn't just be people from upper middle class families who are a certain age or a certain gender or a certain anything. These are the people that are going to be influencing the products and services that we use, so we need them to represent who we are. And so, so I'd say it's been a real privilege being a woman in leadership. And I think there's been more advantages for me than disadvantages. But I know that's not the case for everybody.
Let me just ask one question, and then we want to pray for you, Eva. For people here who have a sense of something, an idea, a dream, whether they would say, I think God is kind of spurring this in me or developing this or whatever that looks like, what would you say to someone who's like, I think God is maybe inviting me into this kind of an adventure from your experience and learnings? What would you say to us, maybe collectively as a church, or an individual here this morning who's like, I just wonder if I should step out and try something like that?
Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely ways of doing it that are not like walk into your boss's office tomorrow, quit your job, and do it. So I think there's ways of like testing into these things, like starting it a little bit on the side, or and like scratching that itch a little bit, and then seeing where it goes. So I think that's what I had been able to do through this social venture that I launched when I was like working at the Meeting House, and I think that's like a good way to sort of see whether or not that's something you enjoy doing, whether that's something you might enjoy doing full time, or whether it's like a fun sort of side hustle thing that you want to do on the side. I think the other piece of advice I give sort of to you all as a church as you're growing is that for Bora, while I don't think there were very few sort of like silver bullet, like magic aha moments of like, oh, this is going to change everything. It really was like everybody doing their part, making small changes, figuring out like the next optimization and doing that like over and over again. So, and I think like that feels less groundbreaking, but you do that every day over the course of hundreds of days and, multiple years. And I think that's how we've gotten to where we are today, much more than it was like a single person's brilliant idea that sort of changed everything.
Yeah, I love that. We talk about sometimes God may ask us to take a giant leap. But for most of us, that's not our experience. For most of us, it's that small step, where over a whole period of time, you can look back and say, man, look how far we've come, or I've come.
Yeah.
But it's not that huge leap. And thank goodness, because if God maybe asked us to take that huge leap, we probably would be too afraid to make that step, right? So I appreciate that. That's really good. How can we pray for you? For you, your family, your work, as you bring Jesus in your work and everything into the marketplace. How can we pray?
Yeah. No, I do. I feel really privileged to be sort of where I am, and Andrew is super supportive, and the kids are great, and so I'm very thankful. So I think just to continue to remember, and one of the values that we have as a company is humility. So we want to be both high performing and humble, and I think just continuing to sort of remember that and. I think would be great.
That's great.
Okay.
So I'm going to pray, and then we can invite Sarah up, and she's going to lead us through communion, and Drew and the crew will be back. So God, thank you for mornings like this. Thank you for friends. Thanks for Eva, and just her willingness to share part of her journey and her story. And I think I just so appreciate just how honest she's been about it's just small steps forward and taking things as they come. Maybe sometimes we're always looking for that big aha moment, that silver bullet like she mentioned. But God, teach us what it means to be a community who are just responding and saying yes, Jesus, to following you in small and faithful ways. Pray for Eva and Andrew and their kids. Continue to use them in their community in East Toronto. Jesus, thank you for the way that you've shaped them and used them. Thank you for the way they bring their relationship and experience with you into all relationships that they have. And so for Eva, as she provides leadership, God, use her in great ways to encourage and care for people and love people as they work together. Keep humility at the core of who she is and the company. And Jesus, we really believe that you call us to be salt and light and to flavor and bring light into the places where we spend our time. And so as Eva's in that environment, as she's interacting and encouraging and shaping other leaders, God, would you just use her to point and get people curious about what inspires and fuels her. God, use her for your kingdom, and thank you for her friendship and her, again, willingness to be here. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. I am so sorry. I'm emotional, but it's mostly not that.